Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Day 5 of the California riots. There are Marines in Los Angeles and the riots are spreading. The images are quite dramatic. The politicians are looking to make the most of it. California Governor Newsom versus US President Trump. Will Trump arrest the governor? Can the court stop him? And what does it mean for the US? We'll discuss all of this. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, they presented their budget today. Broke country, surviving on bailouts, boosting defense spending. If you want to know where all the money goes, check the bank statements of their generals. They're billionaires as the country falls deeper into poverty. Also in focus is Prime Minister Modi's visit to Cyprus, a warning to Turkey. Will new Indian fighter jets have Israeli technology and French engines? What are Israel's secret nukes that Iran is threatening to reveal? What's the latest case of biological smuggling in the US? They've arrested a Chinese researcher from Wuhan. What do you make of Apple's new liquid glass? Is this the end of innovation? Why has the Wagner Group left Mali? What does it mean for Russia's ambitions in Africa? And why is Donald Trump pushing for cash for kids? Will this baby bonus work where others have failed? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Japan says 2 Chinese aircraft carriers have been seen in the Pacific for the first time. Beijing calls these routine training. But Tokyo fears this reveals the expansion of China's military activities. Over the weekend, a Chinese carrier had entered Japan's exclusive economic zone before exiting to conduct drills involving fighter jets. India's Coast Guard battling to stop a fierce blaze on a container ship off its southern coast. The fire, which started yesterday, has engulfed the Singapore-flagged ship. So far, the Indian Coast Guard and Navy have rescued 18 crew members, but some are still missing. Myanmar's anti-coup guerrillas claim to have shot down a junta jet. It is a rare victory for the rebels over the Air Force, which has kept them at bay in the civil war. But the military claims that the plane crashed due to an engine failure. Myanmar has been embroiled in a civil war since the junta staged a coup in 2021. At least 9 people have been killed in an attack on a school in Austria. The shooter was reportedly a former student who also took his own life. The police say the suspect acted alone. It is a rare case of gun violence in Austria, which ranks among the safest countries in the world. And the UK's unemployment rate reaches its highest level since July 2021. Businesses have been hit by a national tax hike as well as US tariffs. The Bank of England is likely to continue to cut interest rates into 2026. It last trimmed borrowing costs in May by a quarter point. It's day 5 of the riots in Los Angeles and they're spreading. We have seen protests in New York, in Chicago, in Austin, in Dallas and in Tampa. But Donald Trump is not backing down. He is doubling down. He is sending more security personnel to LA. And not just any personnel, these are active duty Marines. Basically, these are soldiers of the US military, some 700 of them. They are stationed at a base in California. They have already begun the journey to Los Angeles. Reports say the Marines will arrive by Tuesday night, and we'll tell you why this is significant. But first, let's look at the situation on the streets. In Los Angeles, most of the action was seen in downtown areas near detention centers and courthouses. This is where many migrants are being held. Hundreds of protesters gathered outside these buildings. They were pushed back by the security personnel. Take a look. It's more of a standoff now. A crowd of protesters on one side and fully kitted riot cops on the other. Just look at the scale of the deployments in Los Angeles. 4,000 National Guards, which is basically a reserve military force, more than 700 Marines who are active duty soldiers, and some 800 extra police officers. Just imagine the firepower on the streets of LA. It's unsettling for many locals, and understandably so. But President Donald Trump feels it's necessary. He says the violence could have led to an insurrection.
I wouldn't call it quite an insurrection, but it could have led to an insurrection. I mean, that was a lot of harm that was going on last night. I watched it very closely, and it was amazing that the job that the National Guard did. And by the way, the police were working very hard also. But, you know, the police are given instructions to be politically correct. I said, no, you don't have to be politically correct. You have to do the job.
Now, we know that Trump is an expert on insurrection, so we'll take his word for it. But does he have the authority to do any of this? Look at the deployment of Marines. Does Donald Trump have the power to station them here? Has this been done before? And will it be effective? Like I said, the Marines are soldiers, and soldiers do not have law and order powers. They cannot search, seize, or arrest, not unless the president invokes the Insurrection Act. And this law, the Insurrection Act, is meant to fight rebellions. If the US government is under threat, they can deploy Marines at home. But clearly, Donald Trump is safe in Washington. The rioters are not marching to the White House, so invoking this act would have been risky. Instead, this is what Trump did. He deployed the Marines to guard federal buildings. That is their official mission in LA, not law and order, only to protect federal buildings. Trump is hoping that this will allow him to sidestep the legalities. But local officials are fuming. LA cops have questioned the Marine deployment mainly because there is no plan or strategy. And the city's mayor says they are being turned into an experiment.
We didn't need the National Guard. Why on earth? What are they going to do? Do you know what the National Guard is doing now? They are guarding 2 buildings. So they need Marines on top of it? I don't understand that. That's why I feel like we are part of an experiment that we did not ask to be a part of.
We're also aware of reports that the President intends or has deployed U.S. Marines to Los Angeles. The introduction of federal military personnel without direct coordination creates logistical challenges and risks confusion during critical incidents.
Now, this is a very rare move because Marines are highly skilled soldiers. They're used for operations on land and sea. The last time such a deployment was made was in 1992, and that too was amid riots in Los Angeles. More than 60 people were killed in that violence, plus more than 2,000 were injured. Things have not escalated to that level in 2025. So was the Marine deployment really necessary? For Donald Trump, this is clearly a political statement. He wants to be seen as powerful and decisive. And the other side? Well, they want to be seen as resisting heroes. In Star Wars terms, as the rebel alliance to Trump's galactic empire. But both sides need to wake up because this is not a fictional story in space. This is real life. What started in LA is spreading to other places. In Austin, protesters scuffled with police officers. In some cases, they had to fire tear gas. A lot depends on the situation in LA. If things die down there, it may not spiral elsewhere. But if LA keeps burning, all bets are off. As of now, more than 150 people have been arrested in the city. At least 5 cops have been injured, but the worst seems to be over. Of course, that doesn't mean the authorities can relax. All it takes is one miscalculation or one stray rubber bullet to escalate things. All this firepower certainly does not help the situation. Let's see how it unfolds. The riots continue in Los Angeles, and this is escalating the war between Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom. Newsom is the governor of the state of California. That's where Los Angeles is located. Newsom is a leader from the Democratic Party, and Trump is a Republican. So politically, they're opponents, and personally, they have been at odds. Trump has called him names before, like new scum. That should tell you how their relationship is. And with this riot, it's only getting worse. The war of words is turning into a political street fight.
Well, the biggest change from that statement is we have an incompetent governor. So I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states.
The protests erupted on Friday. By Saturday, Trump had deployed the California National Guard. But here's the twist. He did not consult with the governor. Normally, the governor makes that call, but President Trump took matters into his own hands, and that has triggered a constitutional crisis. California has sued Trump. The state government has sued the U.S. president.
This is a law that requires the governor's consent to activate the National Guard. This is the first time since 1965 that a president has activated the National Guard without a request from the state's governor, and the governor of California knows how to call in the National Guard if and when it's needed.
And if that wasn't enough, Trump's top border security official wants to arrest Gavin Newsom. The U.S. president even agreed with him, and now he's doubling down.
And what crime has he committed that would warrant his arrest? What crime has Governor Newsom committed?
A crime has he committed?
Yeah, to warrant his arrest, as you had
I think his
suggested earlier.
primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job. What he's done to that state is like what Biden did to this country. And that's pretty bad. It's the wrong philosophy.
Sadly for Donald Trump, being a bad governor is not a federal crime. But the rhetoric here is deadly. No U.S. president has ever arrested a sitting governor. There is no precedent for it, and there is no constitutional provision for it, although that has never stopped Donald Trump.
He says, you want a civil war on the streets of America.
No, it's just the opposite. I don't want a civil war. A civil war would happen if you left it to people like him. And I liked him. You know, I always got along with him. Never had a problem with him. But he's grossly incompetent.
On the other hand, Gavin Newsom is using this as a presidential campaign pitch. Remember, Newsom used to be the mayor of San Francisco. Now he's the governor of California. He's one of the most recognizable Democrats out there. He has long harbored presidential ambitions. In fact, reports suggest that he was hoping to run in 2028. That's the next presidential election, 2028. But a recent poll cast a shadow on his dream. Only 2% voters see Gavin Newsom as the face of the Democratic Party. But this escalation with Donald Trump gives him the perfect opportunity. He is now the governor who's standing up against Donald Trump. And Newsom is hoping to use that to rally the Democrats. So Trump is trying to make a statement with his federal deployment. And Newsom is boosting his political fortunes. Caught in the middle is the state of California. It's the biggest and the richest American state. California has a GDP of $4.1 trillion. It accounts for 14% of the U.S. economy. Recently, it overtook Japan to become the fourth largest economy. The fourth largest in the whole world, the state of California. Above Japan, the UK, France, Italy, and others. And that makes it an economic powerhouse. California leads the country in manufacturing output. It grows more food than any other state. It is home to Hollywood and the Silicon Valley. It also has two of America's biggest ports, Los Angeles and Long Beach. Combined, these ports handle the bulk of all US container imports, but all of that is now at risk because riots don't just shut down streets, they shut down businesses. In LA, stores have been looted, small businesses are closed. Each day of unrest bleeds millions in lost revenue. And then there's the labor force. California depends heavily on immigrant labor. Key sectors like agriculture, hospitality, healthcare, and construction rely on immigrants. But after this crackdown, many workers have vanished. They're just not showing up. And it's not just businesses, there is tourism too. California draws more than 270 million visitors every year. It's a global brand known for its beaches, wine country, and Disneyland. But now, the images on screens are of tear gas and tanks. That does not inspire much confidence. So let's call it what it is. This is a political fight playing out in a place that fuels America. California is known as the Golden State. If this showdown continues, if the riots intensify, if the workers stay away, and if investors start panicking, America will be killing its golden goose. Our next story is about two Pakistans. Both exist within the same borders, both live in the same society, but their lives are worlds apart. One of them will go to sleep extremely happy tonight, the other will probably twist and turn. Do you know who these groups are? The first is Pakistan's generals, the second is virtually everyone else. Today, the Pakistani government presented its budget. It's actually a smaller one than last year. Total spending is 17.57 trillion Pakistani rupees, which is around 62 billion US dollars. Now let me put that in perspective. India's total spending is expected to be $600 billion. Pakistan is just 10% of that. It tells you how much of a lead India has. But here's the more important thing. Pakistan's budget is smaller than last year. Spending is 7% less than before. The overall budget. And why is that? Because Pakistan is broke. They're betting on bailouts from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. But that money comes with conditions. You cannot just spend as much as you want. You have to cut down your expenditure. And Pakistan has no option but to follow this, to follow the IMF. Yesterday, they published their economic survey. It's a document that details the economy's performance. And look at the total debt. $269 billion. That is Pakistan's total debt, $269 billion. Its debt has risen five-fold in 10 years. So Islamabad had no option here. They had to cut spending. But here's where things get interesting. Pakistan may have slashed its overall budget by 7%, but it has increased the defense budget by 20%. $9 billion has been set aside for the military. That's around 14% of their overall budget. That's also 2.2% of their GDP. Now, this is NATO-level spending on a credit card. And it sums up Pakistan's story. Every budget is about allocating the money that you have, what is within your means. Pakistan is allocating 20% more for defense, that too without increasing the total budget size. What does that mean? They will have to find the money from elsewhere, perhaps from government spending, or from healthcare spending, or from subsidies or taxes. Basically, they will take money from ordinary people and give it to their military, sort of like a reverse Robin Hood. It's absurd how rich these generals are. They run businesses. They own massive properties. They live in luxurious lives. They live luxurious lives in luxurious homes. And I've got some examples for you. Former spy chief of Pakistan, Akhtar Abdur Rahman Khan. He handled American money meant for Afghan rebels. This was back in the 1980s. He funneled billions of dollars from the US. His sons also had Swiss accounts. Recent bank leaks revealed millions in their account. Next is Asim Salim Bajwa, a retired lieutenant general. He headed the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor projects. His family set up 99 companies in 4 countries, and that included a big pizza brand called Papa John's. They had 133 outlets worth $40 million, 40. Next is former army chief Ashfaq Parvez Kiani. His family was linked to a housing scam. He was accused of fraud worth 17 billion rupees, which is around $60 million. And finally, you have Parvez Musharraf. He reportedly held 2 billion rupees in offshore accounts, which is more than $2 million. He also had 170 items of gold and multiple properties inside and outside Pakistan. And this is the story of most Pakistani officers. They're sometimes called crore commanders instead of corps commanders. And do you know what makes this worse? For starters, the state of ordinary Pakistanis. Almost 42% of them live in poverty, 42% of the population. 11 million of them are staring at starvation. Yet what does Pakistan do? They give more money to the generals. Secondly, what is this allocation for? They have never won a war in their history, never ever. They lost half the country in 1971. They lost the recent battle against India. So what is all this money for? It's basically a reward for failure. Yes, the IMF should ideally call them out on this. They should put conditions on their loans. But let's face it, if they haven't done it 25 times, they won't do it for the 26th. So Pakistan's people must take matters into their own hands. These resources belong to you. They must be used for your education, your health, not to enrich some failed generals in Rawalpindi. Unless Pakistanis realize that, the situation won't change. Pakistan dominated the news last month, but close behind was Turkey. Indians were fuming at their support for Islamabad. Many travelers decided to ditch their plans for Turkey. They wanted to boycott the country. Unfortunately, boycott is not a national strategy. It must go beyond that. And looks like New Delhi realizes this. Reports say Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to visit Cyprus next month. He's going to Canada, or later this month, in fact. He's going to Canada for the G7 summit. And he will make a stop in Cyprus on the way there. But what does Turkey have to do with that? How does it affect them? Let's pull up the map first. Cyprus is an island in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It is located just south of Turkey. This island has 2 main ethnic groups, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, people of Cyprus of Greek and Turkish descent. Which brings us to history. In 1974, there was a military coup in Cyprus. This coup was supported by Greece. In response, Turkish military invaded the island, and they took control of the northern part of Cyprus. 5 decades later, things have not changed. The island remains partitioned in 2. The northern part is called Northern Cyprus. It is backed by the Turkish government, but no other country in the world recognizes it. And the south is the actual Cyprus, a member of the European Union. Naturally, they have major differences with Turkey on sovereignty, on marine resources, and on gas exploration. You have Greece and Cyprus on one side, and you have Turkey on the other. Obviously, it makes sense for India to reach out to Cyprus. Having said that, this is not just about convenience. It is not a case of your enemy's enemy being your friend. India has invested in its relationship with Cyprus. and has done it for a long time. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi visited this island back in 1982. Atal Bihari Vajpayee visited in 2002. Ex-President Ramnath Kovind visited in 2018 and Foreign Minister Jaishankar in 2022. So the outreach is not happening out of the blue. It is part of India's long-term approach. And it has delivered so far. Cyprus supports India on most important issues. They back us on Kashmir, they have condemned cross-border terrorism, and they support our campaign for a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. Basically, Cyprus is a friendly country. Recently, this relationship has got a new boost, all thanks to the IMEC project. That's the India Middle East Economic Corridor, IMEC. It basically connects India to Europe via West Asia. And guess what falls in the middle of this route? Cyprus. They could get millions of dollars in investment and loans, which is why this relationship is a win-win. The question is, what more can India do, especially when it comes to pressuring Erdogan? Well, weapons is one option. Cyprus is hoping to spend 2% of its GDP on defense. Unlike other European countries, they don't have a bloated budget. So India's affordable weapons could be attractive. In fact, both sides signed a military cooperation deal in 2022. Let's see if Prime Minister Modi will build on that. And why just Cyprus? India could also try to sell weapons to Greece. Reports say Athens is interested in the BrahMos missiles. Let's see if it leads to something concrete. Either way, these moves confirm a crucial thing, that India is being proactive. It has realized the extent of the Turkish threat, which is, by the way, not limited to Pakistan. Turkey is also selling weapons to Bangladesh and to the Maldives. Their President Erdogan is a master of geopolitical chess. He never fights in the open. He lurks and operates in the shadows, backing enemies, proxies, and radicals. It's time India gave him a taste of his own medicine. Turkey and China have picked a side. They're backing Pakistan, not just diplomatically, but also militarily. And this has created a new security challenge for India. It has also triggered a sense of urgency. So India is accelerating defense procurements, especially the pending orders for the Air Force. And for this, India is turning to its trusted partners, like Israel. It's an old defense supplier of India. It's among the top 4 defense suppliers of India, along with Russia, France, and the US. And now Israel will help India with fighter jets. They will supply cutting-edge technology for the Tejas, technology like the AESA, that's Active Electronic Scanned Array, AESA. I know it sounds technical, so let's try to simplify it for you. For a fighter pilot, AESA is like having X-ray vision in the skies. It helps the pilot identify enemies. How? It sends out radio waves. They bounce off the target and send a signal back to the aircraft. So this technology can track dozens of targets at once. From drones to enemy jets and even missiles, it can cover all of them. So this is a critical piece of technology. It helps pilots avoid surprises and stay safe. It is made by an Israeli company called Elta, and now they're giving it to India. They're offering critical upgrades for the Tejas. This was long overdue. Although the wait for Indian pilots is not really over, because the Tejas, the new Tejas, is not ready yet. That's the Tejas Mk-1A. It is being built by HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, India's state-owned defense giant. For decades, the Air Force has relied on HAL. They secured the Tejas contract in 2021. It's been 4 years since. 4 years, not a single jet has been delivered. The HAL has missed every delivery deadline. They were supposed to supply more than 80 jets starting March last year, but not a single one is ready yet. India's Air Force chief has raised concerns publicly and repeatedly.
Timelines is a big issue. That is where that Vachan part comes in. So once a timeline is given, not a single project that I can think of has been completed on time. So this is something where we have to look at. Why should we promise something which cannot be achieved? While signing the contract itself, some of the times we are sure that it is not going to come up. But we just sign the contract. Uske baad dekhenge kya karna. Obviously, then the process gets vitiated.
This was not his first warning. He's been asking for Air Force acquisitions to be fast-tracked so that India can maintain an operational edge. Clearly, the Tejas program has fallen behind, and one big bottleneck is engine supply. Now, we don't make our own jet engines yet. It's very advanced technology. It is hard to crack. So for engines, India has been relying on America's GE, General Electric. They won the contract in 2021, and they too missed deadlines. Their first engines came only in March this year, again after a 4-year-long wait. And this disrupted all timelines. It pushed the entire Tejas program off track. So India now faces a tricky question. How do we streamline our aircraft procurement? What are India's options? What are the alternatives? Like I said, India is turning to its trusted partners, which brings me to the French. India is considering French engines now. The discussions are on with French aerospace giant Safran. They too make jet engines, so India could rope in Safran for the next version of the Tejas, the Mk2 fighter jet. It's an upgrade to the Mk1 jet. It is likely to replace the Mirage 2000, the Jaguar and the MiG-29 jets, which are currently in the IAF's fleet, the fleet of the Indian Air Force. But why Safran? Because India does not have the luxury of time. India needs a large number of fighter jets, and it needs them quickly. For this, it will have to boost domestic production, and it cannot put all its eggs in one basket. India will have to engage with multiple suppliers and integrate new technology rapidly because our security landscape is changing. China is arming Pakistan against us, giving them all kinds of next-generation weapons. Countries like Turkey are giving them drones. You see, Operation Sindoor has set a new normal. India has decided to impose direct costs on Pakistan for supporting terror groups. A terror attack will be an act of war. And this new doctrine requires readiness. It requires more firepower. It requires urgent acquisitions. Making it at home is a good long-term strategy, but it's going to take time. Until then, India must rely on trusted partners and diversify. Because a delay is no longer just an inefficiency, it's a vulnerability. And in the current security environment, India cannot afford it. There's a secret in West Asia that everyone knows, but no one officially admits. It is Israel's nuclear weapons. Israel has never confirmed that it has nukes. It has always maintained ambiguity. But ambiguity only works if no one shines a light, and Iran wants to change that. Iran wants to reveal Israel's secrets to the world. How? With a treasure trove of secret documents, all detailing Israel's secret nuclear facilities and its arsenal. So what exactly is Iran threatening to reveal, and where did this information come from? Also, why now, at a time when both nations are already at the edge of conflict? Our next report tells you.
It's the worst-kept secret in West Asia. Israel has nuclear weapons. It won't say it does, and it won't say it doesn't. But the world knows. The intelligence community knows. And most of all, Iran knows. For decades, Israel's policy has been one of nuclear ambiguity. Officially, it neither confirms nor denies the existence of its nuclear arsenal. But the estimates range from 80 to 200 nuclear warheads. This poker face strategy has served Israel for over 5 decades. The problem for Israel is that it only works if no one peeks at your cards. What Iran is now threatening to do is rip the veil off that carefully guarded secret, or at least create the impression that the veil has already slipped. Iran's intelligence minister says the country will reveal sensitive Israeli documents related to its nuclear facilities. Esmail Katib calls them a treasure trove, but he hasn't provided any immediate evidence.
The Iranian intelligence service has obtained a large amount of strategic and sensitive information and documents of the Zionist regime, including thousands of documents related to the regime's nuclear projects and facilities.
Iran is yet to confirm what evidence it has gathered, but it claims it has thousands of documents. Where did these come from? Well, it could be linked to Roy Mizrahi and Al-Maghtias. The 2 Israeli nationals were arrested in May for allegedly spying for Iran. It could also be connected to a reported hacking of an Israeli nuclear research center last year. Why does it matter? If Iran begins to publish what it claims to know, the implications are vast. For one, it will pressure Israel to respond diplomatically, militarily, or at least publicly. The long-maintained myth could become untenable. It could also offer hostile actors a rare window into Israel's most guarded infrastructure. More crucially, it could ignite a regional arms race. And then there's the international legal question. Israel is not a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It could raise questions on being a responsible nuclear power. So any such revelation could raise a lot of questions. But such posturing is not new for Iran or Israel. For years, the 2 countries have waged covert operations against each other. Israel has been accused of assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists. Iran responded with its own cyber attacks and reportedly began grooming insiders within Israel's intelligence community. So it's not hard to imagine that Iran's intelligence agencies finally scored. Or maybe this is just smoke and mirrors, a move meant to distract from its own nuclear program. Last week, the United Nations nuclear watchdog said that Iran had carried out secret nuclear activities. European powers are pushing for a reimposition of UN sanctions. So where does this end? The next phase may not be about stopping the bomb. It is about managing the presence of multiple ones, held by enemies who despise each other and distrust every word the other says. Israel still won't talk about its nukes. Iran now won't stop talking about its capability. And West Asia is caught between a secret and a threat.
There is a new scare emerging from the United States. America is confronting a new threat. It involves Chinese researchers and potentially dangerous biological materials. In 1 week, there have been 2 arrests. The latest case was reported just yesterday. A Chinese researcher was arrested in Detroit. She is from Wuhan. The researcher is from Wuhan. And yes, it is the same city where the pandemic began in 2019. Wuhan is back in the headlines now, this time because of a researcher. She's a doctoral student from Wuhan. So what brought her to the US? A 2-year-long research project. But American agencies say that this researcher had a different agenda. Yesterday, they detained her at the airport and took her into custody. And they say that since last year, she has been shipping packages from China. These packages had quote-unquote biological materials. At least 4 shipments were made in the past. And yesterday, authorities intercepted a similar package. It was concealed between the pages of her books. So what was she bringing in? What was the shipment? It had roundworms, which may sound like a harmless thing, but they can cause serious damage. They can damage crops and disrupt entire ecosystems. Also, you cannot carry these around in the US. You need a permit to bring them in. But this Chinese researcher did not have the permit. What's worse, when local authorities questioned her, she lied. That's what American agencies are saying, that she was lying. And this is not an isolated incident. Last week, 2 more researchers were charged, 2 more Chinese researchers. They too were linked to the smuggling of biological materials. And what did they bring in? A potentially toxic fungus. Again, this was shipped from China. One researcher has been arrested. Reports say she is linked to the Communist Party. Her accomplice is back in China. The US Attorney's Office is looking into the case now, and they have made some serious allegations. Their statement describes the fungus, and I'm quoting, as a potential agro-terrorism weapon, one that can cause billions of dollars in economic losses.
Fusarium graminearum is a worldwide distributed pathogen. It infects wheat and corn and other crops. And it does have the potential to produce toxins, mycotoxins, that can impact the feed quality.
These incidents have alarmed American agencies, from the FBI to Customs and Border officials. They're all part of the investigation. As of now, there is no evidence of malicious intent, though. And remember, there's also a wider crackdown on Chinese students in the US. They're coming under scrutiny. It's part of Trump's trade war and diplomatic wrestling with China. Nonetheless, this pattern of events is worrying, and it must be investigated. Why are Chinese researchers smuggling biological materials into the US? The FBI has also raised this. The FBI chief, his name is Kash Patel. This is what he said, and I'm quoting. This case is a sobering reminder that the CCP is working around the clock to deploy operatives and researchers to infiltrate American institutions and target our food supply, which would have grave consequences, putting American lives and our economy at serious risk. So we have undeclared and concealed specimens smuggled across borders and packaged as research. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it is this. New health risks may not just come from nature, they are more likely to emerge in a laboratory. Even with the Wuhan virus, the lab leak theory remains unproven, but it has not been dismissed either. And that's because China has blocked access and refused to share evidence. So we may never really know. But here's what we do. Biological threats move silently, without warning. They may be carried in suitcases, in small vials, even between the pages of a book. And this is not fiction. This is the reality of our world. The US is raising its guard against these risks. The rest of the world may want to do the same.
Our new OS releases will be available as developer betas today.
There was a time when Apple keynotes felt like a concert. Thousands tuned in. Steve Jobs would stroll onto the stage. He would unveil something we did not even know that we were missing. And suddenly the world couldn't live without it. The iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. Whole industry shifted overnight and Apple stocks would soar. But fast forward to 2025 and the vibe couldn't have been more different. Yesterday was Apple's annual WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference. So Apple unveiled the Liquid Glass, its biggest redesign since 2013.
We began by rethinking the fundamental elements that make up our software. And it starts with an entirely new expressive material we call liquid glass. With the optical qualities of glass and a fluidity that only Apple can achieve, it transforms depending on your content or even your context and brings more clarity to navigation and controls.
The new user interface looks like the future. The software is sleek, it dynamically reacts to motion and light, it lets users see through everything. Basically, it's transparent. And in the age of generative intelligence, it feels like a cheap party trick. And not just to us, the consumers. Even the investors were disappointed. Just 6 minutes into the show, Apple stocks dropped by 2.5%. So what happened here? Has Apple lost the plot? 1 year ago, they announced a grand AI vision. They called it Apple Intelligence, and Wall Street lost its mind. There was a $200 billion spike in Apple's value. Headlines declared the iPhone was finally about to become smart. Siri was about to get a brain. 12 months later, Siri's upgrade is MIA, missing in action. Her long-awaited upgrade has been postponed once again. Apple says it needs more time. Meanwhile, its competitors are sprinting ahead. Google's Gemini is writing essays and planning meals. Meta's AI is all over WhatsApp. Microsoft is stuffing AI into your Word docs. OpenAI is hoping to build devices. And Apple? Apple is showing us buttons that fade in sunlight. Now, to be fair, Apple has always been cautious. They don't like to ship half-baked ideas. They do not chase every shiny object, and in many ways that has worked for them. It's why people trust their products. But this is not about trust anymore. This is about pace. And Apple is way behind right now. What's worse, they seem to have accepted it. They're not even pretending to lead. And you could feel it during this event, this WWDC. Critics say a lot of this has to do with the man leading the company right now, and that is Tim Cook. In 2011, he took over Apple from Steve Jobs, and since then he has turned Apple into the world's first $3 trillion company. By every capitalist metric, he is a success. And yet, Tim Cook's Apple feels different. The radical reinvention is gone. In its place, there's an obsession with refinement. Apple's most recent innovations have been safe. A slightly thinner MacBook, a slightly brighter screen, a slightly less annoying Siri. Even Apple's own boardroom seems to know it. Reports suggest executives have internally acknowledged this. They say AI could make the iPhone irrelevant within a decade. So Apple is now in a race not to lead, but to survive. And the threats are not limited to technology. Legally, Apple is being boxed in. The company could lose $20 billion, a $20 billion annual deal with Google. Its App Store revenue faces antitrust heat, both in the US and the EU. And then there's China. Most of Apple's manufacturing happens in China, but Donald Trump's trade war has exposed this vulnerability. Apple will now have to move or face tariffs. So is this the beginning of the end for Apple? We say not so soon. The company still prints money. It still sells millions of iPhones. It still has time, but the threats to its dominance are multiplying. To course correct, Apple will have to do what it hasn't done in years. It will have to take risks, tear down its walled garden, rethink the privacy pitch, embrace third-party AI models, license Gemini or partner with OpenAI, let Siri talk to other brains, and allow customers to leave the Apple ecosystem without wanting to. The other alternative is to slowly fade into irrelevance. Because here's the truth, Apple did not win by being polished, it won by being bold. The original iPod was clunky, the first iPhone lacked apps. The Mac was overpriced, but Steve Jobs bet on the future, and he was right. Today, Apple is betting on refinements. But the age of refinement is over. We are in the age of reinvention. If Apple cannot reinvent itself, someone else will do it for them. And now let's turn our attention to Mali. This is a landlocked country in West Africa. It is home to about 24 million people, and it is currently ruled by a military junta. About 4 years ago, the junta seized power in back-to-back coups. It built stronger ties with Russia. That's when the Wagner Group came to Mali. This is a Russian mercenary group. It has been operating in Mali, promising to counter terror threats. But recently, violence has soared in the country. Terror attacks have rocked the nation. So now, the Wagner Group is leaving Mali. What does this mean for the country? And what does it mean for Russian influence in this region? Here's a report.
It has been more than 3.5 years. The Wagner Group has persisted in Mali. But now, a shift is underway. The Russian mercenary group is withdrawing from the landlocked West African country, saying that they have, quote-unquote, fought terrorism side by side with the people of Mali, killing thousands of militants and their commanders who terrorized civilians for years. But how true is this? Mali has been grappling with a militant Islamist insurgency for more than a decade. In 2012, militants swept Mali. They took over major cities, and violence ensued. They were driven out the following year. This happened with the support of the French military. So troops of the former colonial power stayed back in the country, mainly to fight the advance of terrorists in Mali. But peace was temporary. In 2020, military junta seized power in back-to-back coups. It promised to restore stability. Instead, it broke Mali's ties with France. It expelled French troops and made a pivot to Russia. In December 2021, the junta began relying on Russian mercenaries to counter terror threats. The Wagner Group was deployed in Mali. Since then, it has been accused of regularly committing abuses against civilians. And in recent weeks, there has been a resurgence of terror attacks on military bases in the country. Earlier this month, twin attacks by Islamist terror groups shook Mali. more than 30 soldiers were killed. So amid heavy losses from deadly attacks and allegations of civilian abuses, the Wagner Group reputation has taken a hit. And now, it is leaving Mali. But this does not mean that Mali will be without Russian fighters. Russian mercenaries will remain in the country under the banner of Africa Corps. This is a separate Kremlin-backed group. It was created after Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin led a failed mutiny against the Russian military in 2023. The Africa Corps will remain in Mali, along with Russian security advisors. So it is expected that there will be a shift in focus, from fighting towards training the junta. And Mali is not an isolated case here. Over the past few years, Russia's presence and influence has grown steadily in the wider Sahel region, which incidentally accounts for more than half of all deaths worldwide from terrorism. Militants have heightened attacks in the region for months now, especially in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Since the beginning of May, more than 400 soldiers have been killed by militants. At the same time, Russia and its allied forces have increased their military, political, and economic influence in West and Central Africa, especially in Mali, Central African Republic, and Equatorial Guinea. This week, Russia has said that it is working to further enhance the ties, as Western powers retreat from the region. Moscow is keen to step into the vacuum, amid rising political instability and violence. So Wagner's departure is not a signal to an end of Russian influence in Mali. It is merely the end of a chapter.
America has 99 problems, and one of them is children. Americans are not having enough of them. Since 2007, the fertility rate has dropped by a quarter. Fertility rate is the average number of children a woman has in her lifetime. It is a crucial indicator. It tells us about population dynamics. In the US, the fertility rate stands at 1.6, and this is shrinking the American population. So the home of the brave does not have enough kids, and this is making them anxious. So the US is brimming with brilliant ideas. Take Vice President J.D. Vance, for instance. He wants parents to have more voting rights than so-called childless cat ladies. Elon Musk is hard at work. He's trying to boost the birth rate all by himself. And what about the self-anointed fertilization president, Donald Trump? He's panicking. So as usual, he's throwing money at the problem. Along with a catchy name in typical Trump fashion, he has unveiled a new federal program. It is called Trump Accounts. It's all about cash for kids. The government will open investment accounts for toddlers, for babies born during Trump's current term. Each of them will receive $1,000. This will be a one-time contribution made by the government and controlled by the guardians. It will be a tax-free investment. It will track the stock market. The account will be tied to how the overall stock market performs. The profit will be added to the investment, and the full balance can be taken out when the child reaches the age of 30. And Donald Trump hopes that giving people $1,000 will push them to have more babies. He calls it a pro-family initiative. So you know what it really is. It is a baby bonus. Yes, another year, another country, but the same old problem and the same tired plan. A baby bonus. But why? Because population decline is bad news. Fewer children born means fewer workers, more labor shortages, slower economic growth, an aging society, more pressure on social welfare, and the fear of national security. So countries are offering cash incentives to families with newborns. But this rarely works. China has tried the baby bonus, yet their population has fallen for a third consecutive year. So they have moved on to other panic moves. They want all hospitals to offer epidurals during childbirth. This is to relieve pain and to incentivize birth. Vietnam is in the same boat. Birth rate has fallen to a record low there, so the country has abolished its two-child policy. Honestly, I could go on, but I will cut to the chase. None of these moves can help the birth rate, and they haven't so far. The United Nations released a report. It says the world fertility rates are in, and I'm quoting, unprecedented decline. And look at the worst case scenarios. Countries like South Korea, Japan, they have a population emergency. Look at the world's most populous nation, India. Fertility rate is falling in India. Indians are having fewer babies. And now look at the gold standard of childcare policies, which is Sweden. Sweden spends 3.3% of its GDP to support families, 3.3%. But over the last decade, their fertility rate has dropped from 2 to 1.4 births, which is even lower than the United States. Sweden is doing worse. So it is bad news pretty much across the board. And why is this happening? Because children are more expensive than they were earlier. Whether in terms of time, money, or other resources, today 31% people are having fewer children than they want. 39% people say that it is because of financial reasons, 22% because of housing problems, and 18% due to lack of reliable childcare. And these are all deep-rooted issues. So a baby bonus won't help here. People need lower cost of living. They need maternal and paternal paid leave, affordable housing, childcare, and education subsidies. People need long-term solutions because children are a long-term responsibility. So leaders should know better than to offer families a one-time payment. Because like I said, it has not worked so far, and it probably never will. You've heard about old wine, new bottle. Now imagine old wine, broken bottle. That sums up Apple's keynote event yesterday. They did not unveil any new device. All they announced was a liquid glass. I know it sounds all fancy, but it simply means that all your icons and buttons will be transparent. That's what billions in R&D gets you, a transparent button. Naturally, the internet is not impressed, and as always, they made their emotions clear.
We call liquid glass.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Scenes of joy in Ukraine after soldiers return as part of a prisoner swap with Russia. 2 BTS members greet fans after being discharged from South Korea's military. And a Detroit woman was kicked out of a Zoom court session for trying to make a sandwich during the session. Finally, we are taking you back in history on this day in 1940. Italy entered World War II as one of the Axis powers. Initially, when Hitler attacked Poland, Italy was unprepared for the war, but the collapse of France convinced Italian dictator Mussolini. He soon declared war on France and the UK. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Have a rendezvous with Italy. Appropriately at this time, we have received more pictures from Rosa. Nothing must now be transformed into reality. We are inclined to laugh at Italy as a fighting force, but it is foolish to...
Да, все, я дома, мама, я в Украине.
question. I'm answering. My daughter is sick. I had to.
You're in court, okay? And we're going to treat it as such. I asked
okay,
you.
I'm properly dressed.
No, don't talk. Don't.
I have on clothes. I have on clothes.
Find us out, Brandon.
I have on clothes.